Okay, so I'm recording. Welcome. 5 ways you can use your business as a tool for social justice. Um, so as I was saying, I'm gonna talk for a little bit. I have a little slideshow for you visual learners, and I'll just share what I have, and then I'll pause in between the little breaks, and see if there's any immediate questions about just clarifying things or anything like that. But if you have bigger questions, put it in that Google Doc that I put in the chat, um, and I'll be looking at that because there's already some questions there, just so that I can stay sane while I'm. There's a lot of y'all on here. But so I just wanted to get started. Sorry, I'm getting emails, people trying to get in. um, oh, okay, 1 second. I'm just gonna let this person know where I am. And this is what happens when you are a one-person show. Although I have my lovely friend T here, who is also going to be helping me with just, checking in with she just waved, checking in with questions or anything that I miss. Thank you. So one moment, let's take a deep breath. Okay. Sweet. So I just wanted to first, could y'all put in the chat where y'all from? Because I know I didn't ask that in the email, and I don't have any of that information. I would love to know where all of you are coming in from. Oh my goodness. Connecticut, Las Vegas, Germany, Brooklyn, New York. Someone's hanging out in Chicago. That's where I am. Should have done this together. Okay, Vancouver Island, Sedona, Denver, cool. So yeah, as I said, I'm in Chicago, and it's really cold here, and I wish that I was somewhere warmer. So just to get us started off and to give you a little bit more information about me, I am a coach, a facilitator. I teach. I I write sometimes, and I focus most of my energy on people that have businesses or organizations or are wanting to create something that where they're really wanting to look at their leadership, and how they're showing up, and also where things like oppression and injustice and systemic inequality show up in their lives and in their work. I identify as a Black, queer, able-bodied, cisgender woman. What else? Oh, in middle class. Just to give you a little bit of a sense. You can only know so much from that information, but a little sense of who I am and how I'm showing up to this. And I say all those identities, one, as how I see myself, how I am seen in the world, and how I engage with my life from a political standpoint. Just recognizing all of these different ways in which the world interacts with me and I interact with the world. And how I got into this work, I grew up in like a personal development kind of um, lifestyle. My dad has been a coach since I was, I don't know, like 4 or 5, and or maybe a little bit older. But I grew up with, like self-help books for teenagers and things like that. And so I just like grew up in this, and then um, as I got older, social issues and everything had always been really important to me. But I came to a point where um, where I was like seeing this divide, um, where like healing, growth, like self-awareness, um, the work that's being done around that was not did not have any kind of like social context, social um, analysis of the systems that affect our well-being and the way that we see ourselves and all of that. And then I was also seeing like with the people that tend to work with the systems, um, there's like a sense of urgency that is very real. And I was seeing a lot of like we can't focus on our inner work. We can't focus on that. We need to focus on things that are like that are more urgent, that are like directly affecting um, people's lives right now. Um, and so like seeing both of these two worlds and just being like, what in the world? Um, and trying to um, bring them together within myself, because I saw them both as very important. They're very like integral parts of me. And having this like split that I think some of y'all have mentioned or like can resonate with, of like I do my spiritual work over here, and then I do like my social justice work over here, and that they can't really coincide. So I just I focused on that in school. I got a degree on this very topic, um, and what I'm about to share with you is not. Um, there's this thing that happens, especially in um, the business world, where we're like, this is my work. This is mine. I came up with all of this myself. I am brilliant, and um, I I don't resonate with that. Because I recognize that so much of what I've learned. I mean, I got a degree in it, but I've learned so much more just from people, and people that have dedicated their lives to teaching and to supporting marginalized communities, um, and like this, what I'm sharing with y'all has been gifted to me through them. So it's like I'm choosing what to do with it. So it's like mine in that sense. Like I'm sharing it through my mouth and with my voice and with my perspective. But there's like such a long lineage behind me. um, so, um, does anybody have any questions or anything about like myself? And I know that for some people, it's really important just to know like who you're engaging with. Nah. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, TJ. And I saw Kay say it's difficult to fully heal without the greater container of a healthy community. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Peter. Hampshire College. We went to the same school. uh, okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and get started into this. Um, Feel free to use this chat. Like, I would love to know just, if there's anything that's like a ooh or a ah, or um, or you're just kind of like jamming with me, then go ahead and share. I definitely want this to be more of a conversation, which is why I'm just gonna like share what I've got with you, and then we can engage more after that, because I don't want to just talk at you the entire time. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Mm-mm-mm. Okay. Hey. So, 5 ways to use your business as a tool for social justice. Um, wow, my my mouse is being weird. Okay, so I won't be able to see the chat um, for, I guess, right now because I can't. When I'm in the keynote presentation, I can't click on anything. I can't use my mouse. So I'll come back to the chat as I go. So I wanted to start out with some of the common strategies that I've seen, and I know that some of y'all have seen because I've like reading what y'all shared with me and some of the questions that you put in the Google Doc. I saw some similarities. So common strategies that are used in kind of like the mainstream world when we think about like how do we contribute to the world, how do we contribute as business owners or entrepreneurs or leaders. These are some of the most common ways that I've seen. And I'll talk a little bit about each and how the downfalls of them. So here we go. So one is the ripple effect theory, as I call it, which says that what I do will ripple out and affect or influence other people around me, which is cool. That's cool. And true, it does, like, what you do, how you show up does have an effect or could influence how other people choose to show up. And it is kind of like grounded in this kind of passivity where, if I show up and engage with love and kindness, then somehow the systems will change around me. And it requires so much more than that. And so all of the ones, I have 3 that I'm about to share, including this one. And all of these are the kind of strategies that people lean on. Like they say, okay, I want to change the world. I want to make a difference. The only way I can do that is by creating a ripple effect. And that's like the main thing that they do in order to contribute. And there's so much more available to us. So I wanted to name that one. And I see that there's some things popping up in the chat. I will come to that after I go through the next 2 ones. There's also, with the ripple effect theory, there's a way in which people can use it to be like absolve themselves from responsibility. So to say, like I can only I can only do so much. So I'm just gonna like show up in the way that I'm gonna show up. And whatever happens, happens. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to myself. Personal responsibility is the most important thing here. And there are real pieces in that. Like all of this is very nuanced and complex, where for some people, like their capacities, that's where they're at. And if that's real, then that's real. And there's no like shame or whatever in that. And the people that tend to use this the most are people that have a lot more resources and a lot more capacity to show up in other ways. So that's what I got on that one. The next one is giving back. And this could look like giving money to organizations or to causes. It could look like creating scholarships. It could look like going to various countries and volunteering or volunteering in your country, or going to go build schools or houses or uh, all of that. And again, there's like a complexity and nuance in this, because all of these are important, like giving back and volunteering, and money is necessary. Like people, especially people that are that hold marginalized identities, people in marginalized communities, like money is in lack most of the time, and so it's important. And also, when that's what we lean on, it can get tricky. For example, if you're feeling a kind of way about the world and the state of it, and you want to contribute, and you decide to go build schools in Nicaragua, without fully understanding what's happening in Nicaragua, what's really needed in Nicaragua, who's in leadership in terms of like this project of building schools. Is it white folks in leadership trying to come into Nicaragua and help and be a savior? Or is it Nicaraguan people saying, yes, we need this, we need schools, we need, whatever it is that you're bringing, and that there's like a conversation happening between the people that you are working to support and yourself, and the organization that's trying to go into a certain community. So, and I can dig into that more if y'all have any questions about that. And the next one is treating the symptoms. And the main thing that I wanted to say about this is kind of what I was saying in the giving back, understanding the wider scope of what's happening, or the deeper the deeper scope of what's happening in terms of like the issue that you're working to address. So there's a huge push for weight loss, and that's something that is like tender for me, because that's something that I have been pushing myself towards my entire life. And for some people, weight loss will support them into like creating the life that they want to create, but there's this larger issue, where we see like, oh, you're unhappy, or oh, you're unsatisfied, or whatever, you want more for your life, here, lose some weight, or hey, you don't think you're beautiful, here, lose some weight, this will fix your problems. And there's this like much larger issue around how we regard our bodies, how we relate to bodies that are different from ours, whether that's able-bodied people and disabled people, people with smaller bodies, people with larger bodies, people that are fat, and so on and so forth. Like there's also like a gendered element and everything in that. And so there's this larger issue about like how we regard our own bodies and other bodies that aren't normalized in our cultures, and that's something to take a look at about like how you are engaging in that dynamic, in that culture. So and if you want to know more about that, there's like T, if you have anything, you can feel free to like share it in the chat. But there's also like, if you Google diet culture or fat phobia, any of that, you can learn more about that. So when I say treating the symptoms, I think that there are some very real and important things that are being done in terms of like harm reduction and, you know, showing up for the people that are like feeling the brunt of like these larger systemic issues. And I do think it's really important to take a look at the larger context that's at play. So I am going to stop the share if I can figure out how to do that. There we go. And then I'll come back to it. So I'm going back up. Okay, so Kundan, is that how you say your name? I want to make sure I'm saying it right. Said I liked your articles on the Gandhi quote and why the self-help industry is not changing the world. Is that the context in which we are doing this? I don't understand that question. I guess I wonder what the context is that you're referring to. So if you want to clarify that, that'd be great. Selena said, I want to inspire my friends and colleagues to do this work of uncovering with me. Any tips on how to approach them? T, did you put that in the Google Doc? Thank you. Okay, I'll come back to that question. The typeface is Better Times. Better Times. I got it on, I can't remember where I got it, but if you look up Better Times font, you should be able to find it. Kay said, Jean Shinoda Bolen's The Millionth Circle speaks about that effect. Cool resource. The white knight mentality is so toxic and is one of the main things I want to avoid in how I approach my own services, as it's so steeped in personal ego. Yeah, it's and it's not only white folks that participate in it, but it is mostly white folks that participate in it. But this idea of like, I have the answer for you. I see you're in pain. I see you're struggling. I see that you have some issues going on, and you know, I have some ideas about things that might help you without talking with the person or the community about what's going on and what they really need. Jen said, love that you were talking about this. Weight is not a moral imperative or a cure-all. Yes. Kay said they are Band-Aid solutions to deeper core issues and societal and cultural issues. Yes. Cool. So I like where y'all are at. Anything else popping up for y'all? Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and dig into this next piece. I only have like 3 major slides, y'all, so I'll stop talking and be able to hear from you in a little bit. Kundan said, well, I think the article on self-help industry is kind of referring to the ripple effect theory. Yes. That individual empowerment leads to peaceful families, which leads to good neighborhoods. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I get where you're at. Yeah, totally. And then Amy said that love that you're speaking about what's creating issues and how we can address them. Yeah. Sweet. Okay, y'all. Kay said the difficulty is determining where we are coming from in offering these services and how we are showing up exactly, the why behind what we do, our intentions, and also how our intentions are received. Yeah, that's something. Oh, yes, that's the word, consent. So yeah, the consent is a big thing, and kind of is a part of what I was just talking about like showing up in people's communities without their consent, or even just showing up for with another person and trying to like give them advice or give them a way to go or give them ideas without consent, or without fully understanding where they are. Yeah, and then the intention versus impact thing is also very important. If you don't know what I'm referring to, I don't want to really go into it that much. But if you Google intent versus impact, you should find an article or two that will pop up for you around that. Okay, I'm going to dig into this next piece. Sweet. Gotta do something real quick. Okay. The inner work. So I wanted to address some things that kind of have to happen internally, not necessarily before you dig into like what it looks like to use your business as a tool for social justice externally, but like while you're grappling with that question for yourself. So the first thing that I have is acknowledging systems of oppression. For some of y'all, that's kind of where you're already at, and for some of you, you might be like, what are systems of oppression? What do you mean? And so I just wanted to make sure that I put it out there, just in case, I don't know where all of y'all are coming in from. So systems of oppression are systems and institutions, cultures, ways of being that we have grown up into and said yes to, that actively create trauma, suffering, discomfort would be putting it mildly, that devalue, dehumanize people based on their social groups. And so there's racism, there's sexism, there's homophobia and transphobia, fat phobia, and all of these things are don't just show up in our personal interactions with each other. They're attached and integrated and foundational to so many of the systems that we participate in on a daily basis, whether that's our schools or the internet, Facebook, like the government, banks, healthcare, the various cultures that we participate in and that are a part of. So I wanted to put this piece out there because it, like everything else that I'm about to say, requires that you that you acknowledge that systems of oppression exist, and that you exist within them, and either benefit or are disadvantaged because of them, or both, most likely both. And so that leads me to the next point of like recognizing your positioning within these societies. So recognizing where you are positioned in these various systems. So at the beginning of this, I named some of the identities that I hold, and that's a way for me to remind myself, and then also just to show up with y'all in a way that acknowledges where I'm positioned in our world, and in our societies. And I say societies just to acknowledge that we all have different societies that we're a part of all across the world, or in terms of our cultures. So my position as a Black woman is different from, a white woman's position, and especially in the US, but all over the world also. And that affects how I experience life, how I navigate about the world, and it affects how that white woman navigates about the world. Um, and in the same way, I have various privileges and in terms of like how people read me, and how I get to navigate the world in terms of like being able-bodied, and I don't have to think about certain things that people with physical disabilities or mental or any other kind of disabilities. There are a lot of things that I don't have to think about. So recognizing, where you are positioned in our world and what that means for you. Um, yeah. And then the next piece is like looking for the intersections. So first, just want to name, if you've never heard about intersectionality, that's another thing for you to Google. It was a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in her academic work. And when it was initially coined, it was a way to name the difference between what, when we talk about women and when we talk about what women experience in our current culture, our current society, that there are differences, there are intersections that show up just in that like branch of women. Or umbrella of women. And especially like Kimberly was especially focused on Black women and how Black women experience a very specific kind of oppression based on gender bias and sexism, but also racism and how that shows up in our lives. So it was originally about honoring the experience of Black women. It's become more of a term that just focuses on the intersections that are present in all of our lives. Meaning, when you talk about Americans, right? When that word is thrown out, I would say I would theorize and guess that most people think of a white American, because that's our culture is geared towards seeing whiteness as normal, as the default. So when we think of American, we think of white American. But there are so many other intersections at play. there are people that have just recently immigrated to America and became citizens. There are people with disabilities. There are people that are of color. There's so many other intersections at play. And so when we talk about this like general group, whether it's like a smaller group or it's like a group of 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion people, looking for those places where there are nuances and complexities at play that are present there, and not assuming who you're talking about when you say a specific group or a specific kind of person. And then the last piece that I have is just, and this is somewhat of what I talked about in the article that Kundan mentioned about "Be the Change" and that Gandhi quote and everything. I think most of us want to be the change. Most of us want to to show up and support our communities and the world, and want to create a better world for generations to come. Getting clear on what that means, getting clear on what that looks like. When you say that you want change, when you say justice, when you say liberation, when you say um, any of those like buzzwords about creating change in the world, what does that really mean and look like for the communities that you're talking about? So especially in your businesses, when you're looking at the communities that you're serving, and the services that you're offering them, being clear on what is it that you want for them. It doesn't mean that you like impose it on them or like you like force them into it, but what is it just for yourself? What is it that you want for the people around you, the people that you serve, our world as a whole? What does that really look like? And getting kind of detailed about it. Because we use words like, oh, the world needs more love, the world needs more kindness. But what does that mean in practice? What does that mean in action? What does it mean to be kind in our systems and in our institutions? What does that look like? And just exploring that for yourself. You don't have to have all the answers, but exploring what that means. Okay, I'm gonna come back to the chat because I saw there were things happening over there. Okay. Christy said this is where, a lot of ripple effect and positive thinking models fall short, often intersectional as well. Multiple oppressed identities, exponential harm potential. Yes, I like that. I'm trying to figure out if I have anything more to say about that. No, yeah, I guess I just want to underline that that the intersections, looking at the intersections, like many of us that hold marginalized identities also have other marginalized identities, and it's a compound effect. So kind of like what I was saying about Black women, we experience sexism, we experience racism, and it is a compounding effect of like we have to fight for ourselves in communities of Black people. We have to fight for ourselves in communities of women. We have to show up for ourselves because there are multiple things at play that are devaluing us and or just disregarding us. And that's true for every other marginalized identity. Like there are so many things at play. Kunin said, yes, and for the coaching industry, the reason why we have a business is because of systems of oppression. This needs to be acknowledged and is not often emphasized by enough coaches and healers. Yes, okay, yes, I want to say something about this. I said a couple years ago in a post, and I've still been kind of like unpacking what I said, where I said that oppression is the reason that you have clients. And, like as Kunin said, like oppression, injustice has a huge influence. I won't say it's like the total reason, because, I feel like there's other complexities at play. But it's a huge influence on the issues that the people that you're serving, the communities that you're serving are dealing with. So if you're working with moms who don't know how to, can't figure out how to take care of themselves and have lost themselves in motherhood, like there are very real systemic issues at play that are making that issue possible, that are making that struggle for her possible. And so, yeah, thank you for saying that, Kunling. Kathy left. Kunan asked a question, and I will come back to that later. Kay said, definitely present in my country, but it seems more passive aggressive here than in the States, which makes it more difficult to recognize by those not subjected to it directly. Yeah. Yeah, there is like a kind of vigilance, as you do more work to be able to um, recognize like the subtleties of how things work. I'm still in that process. I will be forever, um, but you'll like kind of attain this like kind of vigilance to be able to suss out what's happening and dynamics, and you'll be able to pay more attention to like um, if there are like feelings that you get in your body, or you just like I'm seeing something happen here and it doesn't feel right. Like eventually you'll get to a place where you can kind of name even easier what's happening. Pamela said she said she's in Vancouver and agree that it's less overt but still here. I get annoyed when Canadians get smug about this while watching the American news. Yeah. And I love that y'all are pointing out especially things like white supremacy, racism, anti-Blackness are worldwide, and they show up in very, very different ways based on the country or the community that you're in. So it's present. Don't think that it's not, and don't let other people think that it's not. So yeah, it's there, and it just has to be kind of brought to the surface. And Kay responded, it wasn't until I started asking people directly about their experiences and more subtle microaggressions happening constantly that I was able to identify them myself. We want to create change, but I often feel paralyzed by how to go about it in a sustainable way. Yeah, sustainability is a real thing. And I guess if I were to add another thing to the inner work piece, learning for yourself what your capacities are, and being okay with where you're at, like what your capacities really are. So if you know that going out to marches and protests or doing direct actions like really take a lot of energy out of you, and you don't have the tools to like revive yourself, and then that's just what it is. And if that's something that you really want to do, then you got to find some tools to be able to do that. But if you know that there are other ways that where you are more energized by showing up in that way, then that's the way, and that's okay. Robin said, love all of this. When I work with business owners, they struggle to see past the donating time and money approach as all they are able to do. And these topics you mentioned are empowering talking points to bring to the conversation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much more that we can do than just donating. Donating is important, like get people your money, but there's so much more that we can do. Cool. And Charles said, change is easy, change is happening everywhere and not all for the better. One of the challenges we have is we don't have a shared vision of what needs to be changed or how. Yeah, that's real. That is very real. Heather said, it's so easy to say we want to be the change, but actually doing it internally and externally is a whole nother story. It's the real work and it's messy and we're all figuring it out together. It infuriates me that this is not the basis of the conversation in the spiritual industry. It has helped me see that these industries are actually more attached to ego-based ideas of influence, power, and money than true humanity. And we have to be brave enough to stand up to that. Mm-hmm. Yes. Alethea, I hope I'm saying your name right. Yeah, okay, cool. Yes, basically every single client I have is dealing with trauma to some degree, some more than others. Yeah. Yeah. When you like really look at like the culture that we're in, it makes completely sense that there are so many people that are traumatized on at different levels. Um, we've normalized it, so we have learned how to cope in this world, um, and be okay. But um, when, especially for people that hold marginalized identities, um, it's just you're consistently exposed to um, people devaluing you, people dehumanizing you, people not seeing you, um, or just regarding you as a human in general, and that takes a real toll on your mental health, your like physical health, your spiritual health. Um, yeah. Jen said, I'm curious about how this interacts with the fact that so many clients in the coaching industry come from privileged circumstances, which is also a problem, but harder to solve economically. Would love your take on this. Okay, I'll get back to that later. Thank you, Jen. Um, Julie said, how to navigate scarcity mindsets that are based on real scarcity and growing up, but can be shifted now. Okay, I'll come back to that too. Um, uh, Alethea agrees with Jen, and how to reach out with those with less privilege, those with less privilege, and be of service without being a savior. Um, Tabor or Taber. It's important to me that I say people's names right. They said, I have been packing and I'm about to head to the airport, but I've been listening in with interest and we'll catch the rest of the recording. Yay! Thanks for showing up. Christy, yes, and then people, neighbor, Tabor. Okay, thank you. Christy said, and then people not taking your critiques or needs seriously because of your trauma background, which arises from your marginalized identity, adding on to what you're saying about trauma backgrounds. Yeah. Yeah. So there's so much at play. And I really want to get to like this next piece so that I can talk with y'all more. So I'm gonna dig into that. It'll be real quick because I realize that we're almost at the hour mark, and so I didn't say this at the beginning. I wanted to, but so I blocked off 2 hours for this. I'm gonna cut off the the meat of this content after I shared this last piece with you, and then after that, like I'm here until the next hour, wherever you are, to just chat with y'all and see what's up and answer questions, or if you want some feedback on something. That's what I'm here for. Okay, I'm going to dig into this last piece. Okay, so the external work. So I have, these are like the 5 things that I told you about when you signed up for this, and 5 ways that you can, like, as you move through that like inner work of just like bringing more awareness to yourself and to especially the ways in which you have privilege, or you hold privilege identities, and what that means for you, and how you can use that. Here are some ways that you can kind of integrate what you're learning and what you're getting into your business. So through your service or product, and for each of these, each of these are for your own exploration. So I don't have answers about like how or what this looks like for you. because that's for you to figure out and to assess and to play with. But I do have, some questions and things that you could think about as you're just looking at the work that you're doing, or the work that you're involved in, and how you want to show up. So the first thing I have is your service or product. And so taking a look at who is your service or product for. I know most of y'all are service-based folks. But just in case there's any people with products out there. So who is this for? Who is your work geared towards? And that can mean, I'm going to go back to the mother example. So if you're working with moms, getting clear on what that means. What does mom mean to you? And look for the intersections. So what are the intersections within this like umbrella term of mom? Is it, are you for all moms? And then that brings in the next question that I have around like, what are your capacities around who you can really serve? So if you're saying, this product or this service is for like all moms, regardless of where you're at and, what you're up to, or what other identities you hold, is your work set up for that? Is your approach, your product, your systems, is it set up to really support all moms, disabled moms, queer moms, transgender moms, moms that don't really identify with the word mom, but they're a parent, and sometimes they identify with the word mom. Like, looking at the complexities within this like group of people that you're serving, and what's all at play in that. So one of the things that when I first started like digging into this topic that I was really upset about is seeing people, especially people with like large followings online, not when something like huge was happening in the US, whether it was like something around police brutality or like the election or whatever, there would be silence. And then if someone called them out on it, they'd be like, I don't talk about business, or I don't talk about politics in my business. I don't think it applies. That for me, as someone who was like, especially around like police brutality issues, like deeply affected by watching these things happen around me. And if I'm your client, or I'm your potential client, or I'm your community member, and you don't want to talk about politics because you don't think that it matters, but it directly affects, like, say it's a self-care coach, and they're like, politics don't matter, but I'm struggling with self-care because I am like grappling with, seeing Black people killed for being Black. Like there's just so much that's missed when we're not clear on all of the people that could show up in our communities and in our work, or are actually there. So taking a look at that, taking a look at who your service is for, and if any feelings come up, like one of the things that happens a lot is people move to trying to be inclusive, whether it's like a white person trying to be inclusive of like people of color, or like a cisgender person trying to be inclusive of trans people, or whatever the power dynamic is, that there's this immediate push to change the things on the outside. So we'll talk about the other things, but one of the things I have is like marketing. Like, okay, so you start saying like this is a group, or this is an offering, or this is a product for all women, whether you identify with the gender binary or whatever. And people just put it out there without doing the inner work of taking a look at who their services can really serve, and taking a look at themselves and seeing how various forms of oppression are working inside of them, and working in terms of like how they are seeing other people. And you're setting yourself up for doing harm. If you don't do harm, that's a blessing. If you're coming into it from that perspective, because without really taking a look at who you are and what you're giving, there's so much at risk there that doesn't need to be at risk. And not saying, like you will definitely mess up, you will definitely unintentionally harm people, but there are things that you can do to lessen that from like happening all the time. So yeah, so taking a look at your service and your product, and what's showing up there for you. Oh, and also, I guess I was kind of speaking to this, but I can name it in a clearer way. Seeing the connections between the work that you're doing, the product that you're offering, and these systemic and cultural issues and realities. So seeking out and looking for, how is this work that I'm doing with people, or this product that I'm offering, and the problem that it's solving for people, or that it's supporting people with, how is that problem connected to these like larger problems, whether it's racism or any of the other isms, but taking a look at that. Okay, next, taking a look at your brand or community's culture. And the one thing that I wanted to say about this, and if y'all have questions about it, we can talk about it more, is just what is the image that you're putting out there, and just taking a critical look at that. So, because of our technological realities, we communicate a lot through images, and learn a lot about each other through images. So taking a look at like what are the images that you're putting out there, not just in terms of like pictures, but what is the totality of what you have. What is it saying? What are you trying to say? And then also like what are people getting from you, in terms of like what you're putting out there, in your branding, and then also just like how you show up in your community spaces, whether it's online or offline. So one of the questions I had around that was, for example, like if there's a conflict between people in a thread that you posted, or in a group that you are holding or facilitating, how do you handle that? How do you approach that? Or if there's, if you get called out, or if someone just like gives you feedback about something that you maybe didn't ask for, but it's speaking to like how you're showing up, and how they feel about it, how do you react to that? Because of that, it says a lot. It says a lot about you. I've seen people especially people with like larger followings online, um, get called out or um, get feedback that they didn't like and completely flip out, and kind of like demonize or um, completely dismiss what the person was sharing with them. Um, and there's so much information and feedback. It doesn't necessarily have to change how you show up. Um, that's your own choice and your responsibility to do what you want with it. Um, but there's so much there, and so when we disregard feedback, we lose a lot. Um, and it says to people like it's not okay for them to not agree with you, um, which is an issue. It's kind of like a dictatorship. Um, Not as severe, but it can be sometimes. Um, so that's what I got. And if y'all have more questions, I'll dig in. I see there's a bunch of chatties coming up. Next piece, your marketing and sales practices. So just taking a look at what are your practices in terms of like how you choose to market things, um, and how you choose to sell things, especially if you are service based and you kind of like go through a sales process that's more relational. um, what are the practices that you're using, and just taking a look at it from this lens of like looking at the intersections um, and where your values can show up in those practices, um, and taking a look, being on the lookout for anything that's like manipulative or exploitative, kind of like what I was saying in the service or product section, that there's when people want to be seen as inclusive, um, I've seen people start using stock photography that includes more people of color instead of just white people, and that there's like a manipulation in that. If you haven't if you haven't like really looked at yourself, and you're just like, oh, I don't want people to think that I'm not inclusive or I'm exclusive or I'm harmful or whatever. I just like, I'm going to put more images of people of color out there, so that they don't think that about me. Um, there's a manipulation there that's happening, where it can make it seem like, especially to people of color, um, we might see some images and be like, oh, maybe this might be for me, and then get into a space that isn't set up for my success, for me to like fully show up with what I have. Um, so that's just one example, but taking a look at your marketing and sales practices. Okay, money practices. There's kind of like some overlap in the marketing and sales, but with the money, I'm specifically speaking to where you choose to invest your money, um, in terms of your business, uh, whether that's the systems that you use, the um, like we're using Zoom right now. I use Zoom all the time, and one of the things that I want to work on even more is just when I subscribe to or use um, a service that's helping me do my business, that I'm aware of like, um, or at least I just like search out anything about like what the practices are in the company culture, um, what their impact is, what they do with the money, what they're invested in. Um, that's something that I'm wanting to work on doing more, and that's something that you can explore too if you want. Um, but yeah, taking a look at where you're investing your money, it doesn't have to just be related to business. Um, it can be related to just like your everyday life and where you're sending your money. Um, And then I think that might have been, yeah, that's all I got for that one for right now. And if y'all have more questions, we can talk about it. And then the last one is through your leadership, which kind of like wraps up everything that we've been talking about. But when I say leadership, I'm speaking specifically to what being clear on what it is that you're asking people to follow, um, or to subscribe to, or to engage with, um, in terms of like very practical, like what is it that you're what is it that you're offering people, but also like the ideas behind it, the um, what all is integrated into it, where it's coming from, um, and and then all of that, and then being clear as well on just who you are. So being clear on the identities that you hold and how that might impact the way that you show up and the way that other people show up with you, and um, or the way that other people are affected by you, and being clear on your vision, like we talked about in the last slide, and then also taking a look, um, a compassionate but fierce look at your actions and what, if they line up with the values that you hold, with the way that you want to show up in the world, with your vision, um, and if there's um, ways where integrity can be practiced even more. So that's what I got. We can dig into each of these more if you want. We have, or I'm gonna be on here for around like 45 more minutes. Y'all can do whatever you want. Um, but before we dig into the next thing, I just wanted to offer um, a resource. So I really want to dig in with y'all. I really want to like talk with you more. And just in case any of you are wanting to dig into this more, just have more time, more support to be able to, especially like recognize the connections between like your life, your work, and the systemic issues. I have a program, and it's a anti-oppressive program for service-based leaders. It's called Coaching as Activism. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a coach. It's good for anybody that is regularly interacting with human beings through their work. So if you're wanting to integrate more of your values and what you believe and what you're moving towards into your work, check out Coaching as Activism. It's coachingasactivism.com. I'm currently enrolling for this upcoming intensive that starts today, next week. So yeah, next Thursday. And I'm really excited about it. So check that out. There's other ways to engage with it as well. The collective, which is more of a membership thing. So yeah, and if you have any questions about that, feel free to include that in the chat as well. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and come back to this chat and then talk with you. Hey, I've just been talking so much. Okay. Who y'all have been talking? Okay. Cool. Politics apply to everything. Yes. Pam said, thanks so much. I have to scoot off to another workshop with Tad. Oh, cool. Kunin said, I'm curious about your take on cultural appropriation in the coaching and healing industry and at festivals. Yes. Amy said, I think speaking to like the privileged, and being able to like be apolitical, trying to maintain and safeguard their privilege by not speaking up, even if it's not a conscious choice. Yeah. Ashley, who is not here anymore. Thank you so much for talking about politics. I see so many people in the healing industry who like to explain stuff away using law of attraction, and I can't stand that. I edited who I follow so much because it's more harmful than just not saying anything. The tendency to use natural tragedy or national tragedy and natural tragedy for marketing purposes. Heather said, thank you for phrasing the your service or product piece in this way. I see how I can do better with this with clarity and honesty. Cool. Kay said, this is where intent and impact becomes something to really reflect on. Quality feedback processes are paramount. Ember said, thank you for sharing so much. I look forward to receiving the rest of this wisdom in the recording and to applying it. Yay. Kay, can you say something more about what you mean by quality feedback processes? Any best practice examples? And Kay replied, honestly, just create the space for clients and people to talk to you authentically about their experiences with your services and company through reviews, surveys, focus groups, and asking them directly. Cool. Manipulative marketing seems or feels just terrible and results in dishonest business practices in general, which is why I love Tad Hargrave's work. Me too. Jen left. Thank you, Jen. Robin left. Taking a compassionate but fierce look at your actions. Yes, coaching activism is awesome. I agree. Kunin said, I love compassionate but fierce too. That's why I often say love is kind, playful, and fierce. The fierce part is often ignored in the non-political mainstream coaching and healing industry, which feels like it's teaching docility or docility, masquerading as peace. Yeah. Alexandra, your insight on using stock photos to be more inclusive was really eye-opening for me as a white person. What can I do to be sensitive to individual journeys without appearing exploitative? I certainly don't want to only advertise to white people, but also want to present authentically within my capabilities. I will get to that question. Yeah, put your questions in the Google Doc because I'm about to go over to that. Hard to tell for sure, but the group here seems to be mostly white. White passing, light skin. Is this true of your program too? Who is your program targeting? I can answer that real quick. Yeah, it tends to be mostly white folks. There are, a group of people of color in the group as well. And I am actively working to practice showing up and facilitating from a POC-centered framework. So although it's majority white people, working to center the people of color in the space, because so much of the self-help, personal growth, the world is white-centered. And so I'm actively in the practice and exploring what it looks like to center people of color and seeing what that looks like. So it's not targeted towards white people. I would love anybody that wants to join to join. I think it resonates with a lot of white people, which is something that I'm also like constantly reflecting on and unpacking as well. Cool, and Nancy, thank you. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna go back to this Google Doc, but also like I see, so we have 22 people on, and I want to get to the Google Doc, but I also want to see if there's just anybody that had questions in the Google Doc or have questions now, like we can just, if you just want to share your question with me, that might actually save us more time. Anybody got anything? Okay. Alethea, shared, as a woman of color who has done some work around understanding privilege, especially, yeah, copy and paste it, Mariah. and then I might want to talk with you if you want to talk. Um, as a woman of color who has done some work around understanding privilege, especially with regards to gender and race, I feel comfortable supporting people around these two systems of oppression. I have less personal experience and expertise with other forms of oppression. How can I be inclusive but also stay in my lane? Alethea, could you tell me more about what inclusive means to you? If you want, you don't have to talk. I can share my thoughts, but I would love to know more about where you're coming from. And you might have to unmute yourself. Okay. Oh, she said I was responding to what you said about moms supporting queer moms, transgender. Yeah. Okay. So while oh, hi. Hi.
Sorry, I moved out of my room, but I came back.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm a women's leadership coach and a team development coach, consultant. Yeah, I guess that's exactly, like I don't, like if I was looking to get support around gender, I'm probably not going to look for a man. If I was looking for support around race, I'm probably not going to look for a white person. So I was just wondering, like I want to support people. Like I want to be aware, I'm very familiar. I'm basically privileged in every dimension except for race and gender. So I just wonder, how can I support people who don't have privilege in areas where I do have privilege? While staying in my lane and not sort of talking about things that I don't have, but yeah, staying in my lane and being respectful of the fact that I have privilege in those areas. So I'm going to have blind spots, and I'm not necessarily going to be the best person to support someone about if they're not straight or if they're not cisgender or if they're not, I mean, I'm not saying like I wouldn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think you have your answer, like staying in your lane, because your work is leadership, and someone might come to you that maybe isn't grappling with gender or race, but is grappling with like disability or grappling with something else. You don't have to show up in any kind of like any specific way. All you have to do is like believe them and support them and like continue to show up as you've been showing up. Now the inclusive part, I think the most that you can do is just taking a look at ableism and where it shows up in inside of you and in your everyday life, and just taking a look at that and working on that. Otherwise, I think anything outside of that, specifically like in the coach-client relationship, is getting out of your lane, because you're not there to necessarily work with them about their disability. You're there to work with them about their leadership. So continuing to stay where you are with your work, but just adding this lens, and this willingness to just like see and recognize like that this person has struggles, or maybe not even necessarily struggles, but just things that they're grappling with that you don't have to grapple with, and just like owning that tension that's present there.
And I think also probably helping my clients with their own awareness in the areas where they also have that same privilege, right? Just as we do want white people to talk with other white people about race, it's not that we don't want them to be part of the conversations. I think maybe that's part of it too.
Yeah, and it's, you can explore for yourself too about like how you want to how you want to integrate that into your work, and how you want it to show up in that very specific interaction with a client or with your community. Yeah, because it doesn't, one of the things that I've noticed showing up as I've been doing this work is I think people wanting, and I don't know if this is where you're at, Alethea, but people wanting, they've gotten some awareness and now they want to teach it to others. And that's not necessarily the game that we're talking about. If that's something that you want to do, then have at it. Once you do a lot more work and go through some trainings and stuff. But it's more so about how you look at your work and how you look at your clients and your community. It's not so much about teaching them what you are working on and what you're bringing awareness to, but just bringing that awareness to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I'm always talking about race and gender, and I feel like I always have to say, and I know there are all these other forms of oppression too, but I'm talking about what I feel most qualified to talk about. So I feel like I'm constantly kind of feeling like I have to sort of make that clear, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't think any of those other forms of oppression are any less important. I just feel less qualified to speak about them. But I don't know if that's problematic also because, yeah, like I said, I feel like white people do need to talk about race. So I do need to talk about those. I do need to be aware and talk about those other things too. So anyway, I appreciate I don't want to take up too much time because I know there are a lot of other questions, but
that's great. Yeah, and I think one of the things that popped up in a couple of the questions, I think, is this. I think there is an opportunity for all of us to to define what inclusive means to us, and what our capacities are. We can't each of us can only do so much. And if race and gender are the things that you are the most adept in and most energized by, then that's cool. And it doesn't mean that, as you said, it doesn't mean that these other things are less important or whatever. But I think there has to be kind of a both and of hearing what inclusive means to the people that don't have the privileges that you do, and also defining for yourself what that what it looks like for you to create an inclusive space if that's something that's important to you. Because if you're constantly looking outside of you for the world to tell you that you're okay, that's it's a hard place to be, in terms of in general. But also if you're constantly looking at the world around you and saying am I okay, am I inclusive enough for you, am I being problematic, am I hurting you, am I doing something wrong here, that's a lot of energy going outward, and not a lot of energy just focusing on what it is that you want, what's important to you, how you want to show up, and holding kind of both of those things.
Okay, thanks. That's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you, Alethea. Okay. Mariah has, what is the difference between awareness of systems of oppression, our place within those intersections, and so forth, and the ripple effect? Also, how do you know when you've done the work, circling back to the stock photography example, how do you know when you've done enough work that it's responsible to move to use marketing to invite folks with invite folks from marginalized communities to engage work or work with you if you're seeking out diverse stock photos, because it's a more accurate reflection of the world and not because you want people to think you're inclusive. Is that still a manipulation? So what I heard, and I don't know if, it looks like Mariah's still, yeah, Mariah's still here. I think what I got from that question is like, how do you know if you've done enough work to be able to like reflect it in what you're putting out into the world and your marketing and everything like that? And is it still manipulation if you do that, you know, after doing the work? Is that where you're at, Mariah? Basically, okay. So I would be weary of putting a bar that you have to reach, a certain place that you need to get to, in terms of like your awareness of things. Because I don't know what enough work is. um, there is you know, when I was talking about like the stock photography example and, you know, people not doing the work on themselves, I don't know if there's, I don't have an answer for what's enough. That's for the person that's in question. But you know, having like a even just like a basic grasp on what's happening for the people that you're serving, or for the people that you're like wanting to bring in more of. But I'm also, no, that's a side note. So just to answer your question, and I'll get back to that. So I don't, it's like an internal compass question, Mariah, like just checking in with yourself about like, are you in integrity? Where is the action of putting more people of color in your stock photography? Where is that coming from inside of you? Is that coming from like, I don't want people to think I'm this, or is it coming from a different place that honors, that centers actually more so the people that you're wanting to reflect, rather than centers yourself or centers whiteness? So just like, I don't have an answer. And I just have questions about like where your actions that are coming from, where they're what the motivation is behind it. um yeah, yeah, and taking like the question of like intention to another level as well. um so I hope that's helpful. um TJ has, I've recently taken my digital marketing business in a new direction, providing copywriting, social media management, training, and website design for social impact, value driven companies. How can I provide digital marketing that doesn't feel sleazy? Um, so, one of the things that I've learned, and this is also another resource for y'all um, if you're not feeling coaching as activism or you're needing something else, Turtle Tank. I don't know if they're currently open for new folks to come into their work, but I have learned from Turtle Tank, which is two people that lead it, Samia and EJ. And it's turtletank.co. So the first thing that came up for me is something that I learned from them around just like bringing more space for creativity into the way that you approach your work and your marketing, especially. because one of the things that capitalism does is create urgency, and suck out any space and energy for creativity, for exploration to happen. Um, and so just getting creative about um, about how you want to share your work with other people, because that's what marketing is just like you telling people, hey, I got something for you, this might help you, I see that you might have a, a problem, or an issue or something that you're working on. Here's something that I have for you, a resource for you. So getting creative about what it could look like for you to share that, and then doing some of like what we've already talked about, just being aware of like um, of the place that you're coming from and the strategies that you're using to um, to enroll folks into, whether it's a product or a service that you have, like um, taking a like just like a clear look at what is it that you're doing and why are you doing it, because there are certain things that one person might do, um, that is like pretty clean in terms of like there's not a lot of like ickiness or sleaziness around it, and then another person might do the exact same thing, but because of where they're coming from with it, or because of the way that they approach it, it has that sleaziness to it, um, and it might be that person that is bringing the sleaziness into it is like, um, doesn't believe in their product or their service or whatever, and feels like they have to um, persuade or um, one of the things that I wanted to talk about around marketing was pain points. Um, and if you take any like marketing webinar or whatever, like people will talk about pain points, and um, naming an issue that someone's dealing with is necessary when you're selling something. And there are a lot of ways that we do that in our industry that are horrid. Um, and so just um, taking a look at how you want to approach that, especially in terms of pain points, because there are ways in which you can do it where um, you're saying, hey, I see this wound you have, I'm gonna like poke at it and like turn my finger in it and just show you how horrible your life is because of this pain point, and then I'm going to offer you this thing to get you out of that misery. And that's completely different from just being like, I know that you're dealing with this, or maybe because there's some issues that maybe people don't realize that's happening, and so you have to name um, in kind of a different way a problem or a circumstance or a situation that's occurring. Um, for example, if somebody was like offering something for white folks for like around white fragility, but maybe the people that they're selling it to is they don't know this term white fragility. Um, so just pointing to like, hey, do you get like really defensive and upset and like go into shame and guilt and like freak out when somebody brings up race or like brings up um, these issues? That's called white fragility. And I have this resource that might be able to help you with that, versus just like digging in and hurting people even more, or even like to the length of like re-traumatizing people so that you can sell them something. So there are not every tool that's out there is manipulative. Um, it's the way that we use it. So that's what I got around that. um, okay. Good. I'm glad that was helpful, TJ. So Kay has, my concern is Kay still on? Yeah, okay. My concern is in creating the safe space for marginalized people to have their voice heard and accommodated, genuinely. There seems to be a considerable lip service that occurs in business in order to have the right image rather than authentically being inclusive. What can be some of the practices that will allow us to hold space properly for this level of inclusion? Figuring out a format or container for these discussions and navigating all the emotional triggers that come up is challenging. Kay, can you say more about that? If you're available. The sun has come out tomorrow, today. Kay, would you be okay just talking with me? It might, if you're available for
Okay, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Okay, perfect. I forgot that I even had a headset on. That happens. White fragility is a good example, actually, of that, and re-traumatizing people or triggering people in such a way that when you're trying to deal with an issue that is well, it's very difficult for them, and to have a conversation around that and actually make progress in a conversation without people shutting down mostly. I see it a lot. Well, actually, I would say it's not even gendered. It's honestly, everybody has their things that when you try to have a conversation about something that can disassociate or shut down or go into a defensive space, even just bringing up a topic about something. And this could be just, shedding light on any kind of issue in particular. If we took, say there's a discussion about, racism, how racism is present in our community. It's really big towards Indigenous people where I live. And that's something I want to address. But it's difficult talking about it because some people don't see it. Some people don't want to see it. They don't want to listen, don't want to hear about it. There's, considerable myths around it, around people's experiences, and sometimes it's difficult in a group setting, for example, bringing these topics up, because then somebody, is sometimes triggered, and then you can't be valued because they're triggered, for example. And I find it difficult to facilitate that sometimes when everybody's emotions are so high and everybody has, their ego triggers going on, and then it just becomes a lot of conflict. And it's like, how do we reflect that in our business when that's inevitably going to happen? Even if you just create safe space for that, for inclusion, even for the queer community, then you have people saying, well, no, we can't allow that, or that's not okay, or that's not what our community is trying to reflect, or you're not actually holding space. How do we, I don't know exactly what I'm asking for here, but ways that can make it smoother so that people are just centered. How do you create a space that people are more centered and able to have these conversations?
Okay. A few things.
Just saying you're being inclusive, right? We're an inclusive business. We want to hear everybody's, feedback. How do you actually deliver that when there's a lot of conflicting needs or ideas, or
Yeah. So I think being clear on what you're committed to as an individual, because if you're committed to inclusivity and you're clear on what that means for you, maybe it means that you're centering the experiences of the queer people or trans folks in your community, letting that guide your decisions. In terms, I'm gonna mute you. And then you can unmute yourself if you have anything more. Okay. Being clear on your commitment. What are you committed to in that space? And I don't know if it's even possible to hold a space where everybody is able to be calm in the face of like really um, uncomfortable and confronting issues. Because this is stuff like I have to consistently remind myself, because this is stuff that I'm thinking about all the time, but I have to remind myself for my own like kind of self-care, but also like as I'm facilitating, that like this is work that like is literally changing your identity, like how you see yourself as like a human being in this world. And that's a lot. And it's and we all have different ways of dealing with like that the confronting nature of this work. um so I think you being clear on what you're committed to, and what your responsibilities are in that space, um, might support you in being able to show up when there are people in the space that you're holding, or the community that you're a part of, when there are people that um, are struggling with what's being presented to them, whether it's, you know, from a privileged place, or like they're just realizing how much oppression has affected them in terms of like their own marginalized identities. And um, if you're clear for yourself, I think that helps a lot, um, on like what it is that you um, will and will not accept. Because if there are people in your community um, you're committed to centering queer people in your space, um, and you're like leading the space, and there are people in the group that aren't signed on to that. Oh, that was the other piece. I'll come back to that though. If there are people in the group that aren't signed on to that and refuse to, um, if they're not queer, or LGBTQ, um, and don't identify with that, and they have privilege in that way, and they are like showing their whole behind, and and disregarding the queer people in the space, that like what are you committed to, and how do you want to deal with that based on that commitment? um yeah. In case that I agree, I think being clear on what we are trying to create is important, and healthy boundaries in regards to how people are expected to interact respectfully would likely be a focus. Yeah. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Is like also um, having a conversation about like how, if it's like a community that you're part of, or you're creating a space in your work, being clear about like what is it, how do y'all want to show up together? How do you want to deal with conflict together? And just exploring that. You don't all have to get to a consensus. I don't think that's necessarily possible. But that conversation is had, and that it makes it easier as well when that's like made more clear, um, uh, that you can hold yourself and others accountable. So yeah. mm. Alethea said, I've been to anti-racism training where the agreement at the beginning has been that while we want to be intersectional, we're going to keep the focus on race for this conversation. I found that helpful. Yeah. So I think just like having clear intentions, and being clear about how you want to show up, and the kind of space that you want to create, um, makes it doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it makes it more possible for um, relationships to continue to happen, you know, like people to continue to relate, um, if there's this kind of like shared understanding, or um, a conversation about like what's important to each of the people there. Okay. We got 10 minutes, y'all. um, I think I got to the questions that were popping up in here. I know that Kundan, there are some questions that you asked, and I can go over to the Google Doc to look at that. Oh, I see TJ. I'm on the south side, and my building doesn't have a lot of like, it's not like blocking, there's not a lot blocking the sun. So, and the sun is starting to like set a little bit. So, so that's like really shining in here. Okay. I saw Heather's question, isn't intense conflict part of what may need to happen in order for true healing to happen, sort of when a wound gets really red before it heals? Yeah. And that's the thing. Okay, Kay left. That's the thing, is like, for this work, you have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to like risk your own comfort, risk your understanding of yourself, to risk harming people as you go, and making mistakes. And it's like, it's worth it, because this is about like reclaiming our humanity, and being able to honor and regard the humanity in other people. So, and it's for you to assess how much you want to risk. There are people that put their lives literally on the risk every day, and there are other people that, you know, have that value other things and like risk other things, and there's no like hierarchy of how much you're putting at risk. It's an internal question for yourself about like, what are you committed to? What kind of person do you want to be? And what kind of risks do you need to take in order to be that person? Thank you, Anastasia. Okay, trying to see if I missed anything. Okay, I'm gonna go see if there's one other question that I can get. I know there's a bunch of questions in the Google Doc. So many questions, oh my God. Okay. What was the one from? Okay. I saw one, and I know there was another question too about like reconciling the like, you create your own reality frame of mind, and also like the realities of like scarcity and like lack of abundance in the world, and like how these two things kind of like can coincide. So I guess I can address that, and then that'll be the last thing that I dig into. So the thing that, especially within coaching as activism, that I'm constantly thinking about is both the like how to honor the potential and possibility and soul of a human being, and support them to create the life that they want, while also acknowledging the various systemic and cultural realities that are affecting how they're experiencing the world, which is something that we don't see a lot in the like mainstream wellness industry. So that's what came up for me in that question about like create your own reality. I think that with all of these things, there's kind of like a both and, like abundance exists, yes. systems to distribute that abundance? No. we don't have that. And the current reality, like, is constantly exhibiting that like, I do believe that there is abundance in terms of money and food and resources and space for people to live. And of course there are limits, right? Because like our earth can only take so much exploitation of its resources. But I do think there's like a lot more available to us than we are sharing with other people. And so like there's the like, yeah, abundance exists. It's real. There's so much available to all of us, and our current systems, our current realities, the ways that we engage with the world. Thank you, TJ. Don't reflect that. And then with like the create your own reality, I have like a both and of like we are co-creating all of our realities together all at once. And you know, I have some influence over my reality and the world that I experience, and there are 7 billion other people that are also conspiring with me to create our reality. And some of us have more influence than others based on these like systems of power and privilege. And but yeah, so I have some power and agency, and there are other people that also have power and agency and have an effect on my life and an influence on my experience of my humanity. And yeah, so I like to say that we are co-creating our realities together. I don't know of another thing that kind of seems like it doesn't reflect. I can't think of anything else. Okay. That's what I got around that. I saw Krista. Thank you so much for this. I wish operating with the integrity and thoughtfulness you are advocating for was the norm and not the exception. I know someone who has a course to help in regarding learning how to have uncomfortable conversations and getting to the heart of our intentions, especially for all of us white people who are wanting to do our own work and move away from expecting POC to do the emotional labor for us. Let me know if it's okay to post here. Yeah, totally post here if you have it. Kunin said the invention of blockchain is a great example of what happens when someone who is in touch with their own power, agency, creativity, and inspiration cares about collective change to and attempts to do something remarkable and earth-shattering on a systemic level. I don't know what that is. What is blockchain? Kunin, you can talk if you want.
Blockchain is the technology on which cryptocurrency is based on.
Okay.
Yeah, Bitcoins, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And even blockchain is just one example. There are like more types of currency systems in place, like that are happening, like time banks and digital time banks, and like Simbi.com is a great example for digital time bank that's like literally like changing lives, you know, and someone created this company and website, Simbi.com.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So there's a lot of a lot of creativity and like power in using their influence in that.
Yeah,
cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, well, I gotta bounce. I have a Zoom call arranged myself.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah,
thank you, Kunin.
Have a great day. Bye.
Yes, so that's what I have for y'all. I really appreciate those of you that have stayed this long, and if you're watching the recording, that you have gotten to the end of this recording. I really appreciate y'all showing up for this and digging in with me and sticking along. Thank you. All right. And I know I don't know what I'm gonna do. There's so many questions that I didn't get to. I don't know what I'm gonna do with those. Maybe I'll like write some blog posts or something about them. But I really appreciate y'all sharing your questions because it helps me in terms of like offering some stuff for y'all as well. Yay! All right, I am going to stop this recording. Thanks.